In fact, when I'm talking to somebody, I can actually tell how old they are. Their emotional body got frozen in time. If time is money and your life is made up of time, then what does that make life? That money is life. Without money, I don't live. There is nothing that anybody else could ever do to set me free of the bondage of my own labeling and my own language, except for me.
What I perceive with myself, I consider myself a pretty intelligent guy. And what's scary about that is the rationale I can make why I should stay the same. I'm very good at convincing myself of that reality.
When you start getting down to like just single words, and then you start listening to what people are saying, and you're watching the news or whatever it is that you're doing, and then you start listening to the individual words and like the impact that makes on someone and how they feel and how they interpret that single word in the mix of this whole sentence. When you start getting that deep into what is creating your cognitive framing, your cognitive architecture, and you start getting down to each word represents something in physical space somewhere that's now abstracted in the mind, gets really interesting because we're no longer interacting with the space. We're interacting with our interpretation of the space, and everything in the interpretation of the space is got a label on it. Now we're interacting with the label and not the thing in the space anymore, because it's a way of conserving energy. Yeah. And so when you realize that you're not actually seeing reality because you're going off of the cognitive frame of labels, and which is forming all your biases, and why, you've probably seen all sorts of different optical illusions, right? And the magician pulls it off, and it's because that they understand where the culture's bias is at, and they can hide something in plain sight.
Yeah.
So when you start getting down to that depth, you start going, oh, there is nothing that anybody else could ever do to set me free of the bondage of my own labeling and my own language, except for me. Because no matter whoever starts doing whatever they're doing in the outside world, if they ever stopped oppressing me, it wouldn't matter, because I have to stop oppressing me first.
Yeah. You have to reprogram self in a way. And that's really where the energy comes from. This is not a they aspect. It's a understanding the programming that I have, right? When I was an Android user before an iPhone user. And what I loved about Android was you get that with the OS, but you could jailbreak the bad boy. You could make it in your own. You could manipulate it. You could reprogram it. So while there might have been outside influence, you could still mold it and make it in your own. And when you break down those words, the origin of the messages we receive, it reminds me of a scene from this movie Focus with Will Smith. I don't know if you ever saw it. It's an older movie.
It's called
Will Smith
Focus.
is a con man. It's called Focus.
I don't think I saw it.
Will Smith's a con man, and they're like at the Super Bowl, and there's this guy who's just a big fan of betting, and like Will Smith goes on a series of losing bets, and then does this crazy bet, like, oh, I bet you you pick the number of a guy or some crazy play, something random. And they end up winning the bet. And they're like, how'd you do it? And they're like, well, from the moment we picked him up from the airport and drove him, we kept giving him these subliminal messages all the way until like we programmed to make the bet that we knew he would make. All that to say is I interpret our reality just like that. The thousands of thoughts we have per day, the thousands of marketing material we are exposed to per day, whether it's the billboards, the commercials, scrolling through Instagram, how many of those thoughts are our own? And then you pile that on top, or intentional wording here, you stack that on top of the stories we were told growing up, the schooling that we were exposed to growing up. These are all layers upon layers of programming that we never audit and change. Mm-hmm. So then we get to a point in life for anybody who has gotten somewhere and has achieved a certain level of success, right? If you're listening to this, you achieved a certain level of success, but you haven't reprogrammed your own operating system. You haven't really audited what's pulling the strings behind the scenes. And that's where my interest has come to in terms of the architecture of the lie, not necessarily a they that has lied to me, but more or less a set of agreements and stories I've prescribed to throughout the years that might have gotten me here, but are no longer useful to me. And I need to unlearn a few things to make room for the new things that I'm starting to absorb and adopt.
Yeah. Yeah. There's, so we got to go back. All right. So we're going to go back. We're going to go back to like, we'll go back to when you were born first. And then we'll go further back after that. But I think it's easy to understand like how human development works. Right. And so when you're born, you're tuning to the nervous systems of those people around you. Right. Mm-hmm. So we've talked about this on the show before with you co-regulating your daughter. If she's upset, you get into a calm, parasympathetic state yourself, and you go skin to skin, and that chills her out, right? And so we're co-regulating with our parents, whether they're present with us or not. It might be the fact they're ignoring us that's creating what's happening in the nervous system. And so we start getting wired energetically, and the nervous system gets wired before we ever have language. Because beliefs operate the level of language, of words. You know, we can name them. And so usually that's when people start talking about, oh, I have some self-limiting belief, or there's something that I believe that got me where I am that's holding me back now. Usually people get into the language game, and which is a great game to play. It's a lot of fun. I use it with clients. But underneath that is what's going on with the nervous system and what's going on somatically. And so, and so when we're born, we can cry for help. We can woo, or, make different noises if we're happy. We can giggle. We can do all these things. And all we can do is it's an emotionally driven sound, right? And so the language that we have, our first language is emotion, for one. And so recognizing that emotion is the basis, and then how we are experiencing our emotions starts getting wired into the nervous system. So, and then some strategies for survival start coming online before there's ever words. So if I make this type of noise, I'll get the attention I want. If I, this and that, whatever it is, you start learning strategies, and we usually learn strategies from our parents. So this is why, like, a lot of times I've watched this I've gotten deep into this work. I've facilitated this work where we go back, to early childhood, regressions. You regress back to childhood. In fact, when I'm talking to somebody, I can actually tell how old they are in that moment, where their emotional body got frozen in time. So I'll tell a story that before I got into this work, I was working with this coach who was very familiar with this. And he's an executive coach. And we started talking about money, and he was asking me to like map out everything that's going on in the business with money. And I became bashful. And he goes, "What happened right there?" And he's like, "You got really bashful." And, and then because it was unconscious, I said, "Well, I don't know," because it was such an automatic behavior. And I wasn't even aware that I was becoming bashful. And so I went from behaving like an adult to behaving like a kid. And he goes, "If I had to place it, you were about 7 years old right there." And I go, huh. So there was some type of story I learned about money. There's something around money that I learned at a young age that I probably learned it from one or both of my parents, that we don't talk about money, or, we're kind of become shy, which means they were probably frozen in time from at a certain age when they were a kid too, right?
If I may, just quick question on that, because you mentioned being bashful talking about money. So could you express different ages for different areas of your life?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So for instance, I may become there's something tied to money around 7 years old, but I might have like a burst of anger that comes out that it looks like I'm 4 years old. Right.
Yeah.
So, um, or, there was something like another one for me was when my little brother was born. So I was 2.5. I went from being the center of my parents' world. I was all the attention. I wasn't getting it anymore. And then there were some patterns that developed at 2.5 years old because of feeling like my parents love my brother more than me. Right.
Mm-hmm.
These are very common. This is not like unique to me. I've worked with so many people. I mean, I used to run a retreat, a 5.5 day retreat where this is all we did was looking at what happened before the age of 7. And that's why I can spot it. So when I'm talking to somebody, a lot of times I'll watch it's constant. People are always giving themselves away. And I still have my own things. It's not like I'm walking around Mr. Enlightened or anything like that. But there's just the way people are standing when they're talking to each other. Are they in a protective mode? There's all these types of things. But our first language is emotion, and how we use our emotion. We start creating strategies to get attention or to not get attention in certain situations. We learn that from our parents or just from experience. Oh, when I act like this, I actually get what I want. And so the strategies start forming well before language comes on board. And this is why language isn't the whole story, but it is an important piece of the story. And so, and there's a really good book called The 5 Personality Patterns, which is all about how different people start developing different energetic patterns, emotional patterns. They have different emotional patterns. Some people's emotions run out and forward. Some people's emotions go down and to the ground. Some people's energy goes out into the ether. They kind of escape into dreamland. And everyone's got access to all these different patterns, but some people they gravitate towards using one energetic pattern. And when this energetic pattern's in place, it's not necessarily there forever. It's not like, oh, this is what you are. It's just like, no, this is a strategy you learn. And to reformat the energetic pattern requires you to go into early life regression work and untie some things. And there's a lot of different ways to do that. There's not one single method. And so that's one piece. And so around the age 7, the brain starts forming well enough to have language and words. And so your daughter's already saying some words, but around 7 is when things really start forming and they can become almost conversational. And so now you have the strategies and structures of consciousness at the energetic or emotional. I'll say energetic or emotional, interchangeable here for this purpose. And then we have language patterns. And so those language patterns sit on top of these emotional patterns. And so this is how everyone ends up being such a unique snowflake, is because everyone's energetic pattern has got its own flavor. And then you're learning words in different orders, and what you think the definition of that word is different. You ever, as a kid, think that like one word was actually 3 words?
Yeah.
Or like kids are saying the alphabet and they're like LMNOP, and they're like, is that one?
Yeah.
Or is it,
I see it with my daughter. She instead of saying like daddy hold me or mommy hold me, she says daddy hold you, mommy hold you. And like she doesn't know the delineation, and she's still very young, but I can see how couplings of words come together. She doesn't delineate the meanings yet.
Yeah. And so we start learning all these different phrases, and all these words are associated with things in space. And, like up is good, down is bad, things like that. We start having emotional responses to the different words and then different sentences. And we're reading, and this is why I like when parents are like, oh, they don't know what I'm saying. Or I'm like, dude, they're reading your energy. Like, it doesn't matter what you're saying or how quiet you're being when you say this to me. They know exactly what's going on. I mean, they're embedding that pattern in their own nervous system. And so And I know this because I've had to help people unwind it from themselves, and I've had to unwind stuff for myself. Things that seem very mundane to the adult mind are really big, is a really big deal to a child. And so we start taking on these strategies and we have language strategies that get us out of things and put us in positions we want to be in. And, it's usually all around love. It's like, how can I be loved? And if you have parents that abandon, that never were there, then, there's abandonment stories about abandonment that come up. And so when we got to like really address that when we start talking about, like, I want to go back, because if you don't understand that and you just start trying to target I have this belief that, money doesn't grow on trees or something like that. It's so surface level compared to what I'm talking about right now, because that's where most people are operating. They go to YouTube and they find a meditation that's giving you affirmations. And it's like, okay, if I were to just if I gave you a painting and said, paint over it and paint me what you want to see, that's going to be really tough to create the painting you actually want. But if we're able to clean the painting off and we're working with a clean palette and we have just a white background, it's a different thing. Yeah. I don't need to try to overwrite an old code. You can start overwriting old codes. That is a strategy, but it's a long and arduous one. And it's the least disruptive. The strategy of wiping something clean is fast, but it can also really create a disruption in someone's life if they don't have proper guidance on how to integrate a change. So I've experienced the ability to have a dramatic transformational experience where we go really deep, and then also integrate it without totally turning your life over, right? Because I've done it both ways, and it took me a long time to figure it out. So
yeah.
So and then we start learning things from our parents, and then we're sent to school and so on and so forth. And so we start learning how our parents related to money, how our parents related to each other, how our parents related to getting groceries, cooking, whatever it is, how they related to their own health. That gets passed down. And I find that the majority of the time we're either conforming to the way they were doing it, or we're rebelling. Like, oh, I'm disgusted by how my parents are about this, I'm going to do the exact opposite. And in both cases, an individual doesn't have their sovereignty, because rebelling against something holds the belief in place just as much as going along with it. So a lot of people fall into like, yeah, I'm naturally like, I was a very rebellious person. My dad ran his own business. I saw him suffer. I said, I won't do that. Like, I saw him like love his work that he was doing, but when it came time to do accounting or manage money or do the marketing in any way, it seemed really difficult. And I go, well, I don't want to have anything to do with that. And so I was like, oh, I'll go in the Navy, guaranteed paycheck twice a month, this and that. And that was really like my rebellion in a way, was going in the military, which is kind of strange for a lot of people to hear. And fast forward several years later, and I got out, and then another couple of years, I opened up my own business, but I wasn't trying to own my own business. I just saw that there needed to be something be in place. And even though I was trying to be rebellious, I ended up being just like my dad, running a business where I hated the accounting, I hated the marketing, and I suffered. And I go, oh, I am just like my dad right now. This is hilarious, because if you would ask me I was like, I'm nothing like my dad. I don't do what he does. I learn from him. It's like, but unconsciously, next thing I know, I'm a business owner.
Mm-hmm. Do you think a lot of us end up in that loop, whether we conform or rebel, we still end up in a similar situation as our parents, being that we've taken on some of those patterns? And I've read before where, our personalities really get ingrained up until the age of 7. And, my
Yeah.
wife and I have spoken about that. Like, these are the critical years for our daughter, and we need to be attentive of that. But at the same time, it's almost like we're not going to find out if we messed it up until she's older. Like, that's
Yeah.
that's how it goes.
It, the worst thing that's ever happened to you is the worst thing that's ever happened to you. And so I remember in a single retreat, there was a man who, at the age of like 4 years old, witnessed a man rape his mom. Right.
Mm.
That was a heavy one. Right. In the same retreat, there was another man who his, quote unquote, I call it boo-boos. A lot of people call it trauma. I call it boo-boos. Was that his parents got in an argument about getting on a first-class flight to tennis camp on time. Right? One of these seems ridiculous as something that would totally change the trajectory of this person's life, that would cause them to make a series of decisions that was not in their own best interest. And one of them is like, this person has a valid excuse. They truly were a victim here. That's what people would say. I don't believe that's true. You can't, if you're working with somebody, you can never see somebody as a victim if you really want to help them.
Yeah.
And so, because every person is infinitely powerful, but you have to be able to open the door for them to be able to see that. And so the parents getting in an argument about tennis and flying and this and that was a big deal for this person. So even if you do your best and you try to give your daughter the best, there's how she is interpreting things as she goes about her world is going to impact how she behaves. Now, there are definitely people who have a big leg up based on how their parents raised them. I remember one of my first business coaching clients she was my very first one. She crushed it. She went on, built an 8-figure business, sold it, and I'm like, I am a great business coach. And I just kept taking more and more clients. But most of my clients weren't performing nearly as well as she had. And after a lot of reflection, I was like, you know what? I never had to talk to her about her relationship to money. So I went back. I'm still friends with her to this day. I went back and was like, how did your parents relate to money? How were they with money? This and that. And she was like, yeah, they're really cool about it. And yeah, they talked about it, but they didn't seem to think it was that important, but we had plenty of it and all this. And I'm like, oh, this is a person that just expects to always have money. And there's not a lot of emotional energy around it at all, like good or bad.
Yeah.
So her ability to build an 8-figure business was actually kind of like a piece of cake because she didn't have anything to rewire. And then I'm running into these other clients and we're hitting these ceilings around money of they get almost to $100,000 in a year and then not make it. It's just, there's something psychologically going on there. And so, yeah, how you raise a child is going to have a really big impact. Like the further back you go, the bigger the impact. And then we can also talk about, I'd like to get into ancestral and go before you were born as well and how that all formed. But I think that it's going to be worth talking about that after we get to how did you get to where you are right now? So for you, is there a belief that is that you feel is holding you back at this point? And here's the thing is for everything you're aware of as a belief, there are many below that are actually
Mhm.
running the show subconsciously. So you've probably heard that 95% of your behavior is dictated by your subconscious, which is what you're unaware of. And only about
Yep.
5% of your consciousness is you're aware of and you feel like you're like in control of the game in a way. You heard that?
Yeah. Yeah, I have. And it was in Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, Dr. Joe Dispenza. I think he like breaks down how much of your activities in your subconscious. And that's where some of my thought process was going, where you mentioned the ages of 0 to 7. For a lot of folks, it's hard to remember that far back. And for those to be such influential years to pinpoint memories, we know our brains lie to us. We know memories can fail us. So when you ask
Well,
what
it's also
oh, go ahead.
pre-verbal. It's pre-verbal. And this is something
Yeah.
to think about is why is it hard to remember life before I had words? It's because we're thinking in words. And we didn't at the time, we weren't able to catalog and label things at that age. We were just experiencing. And so when I run into people who have good pre-verbal memory, they're usually very in touch with their body. And they can feel a lot, right? The person who's always in their head, ask them about their childhood, like, I don't remember much. That was me. I didn't remember much. And I remember sharing that and thinking, did something really bad happen that I had to block it out? And not necessarily, but it is something. When we experience pain as a child, a lot of times we look for a way to escape our feeling world. And then when we have our verbal cognition come online, we escape to that. And we live in that. And we live in the cognitive space, and we lose touch with reality. And we're calling reality the thing that is just the labels.
Mhm. And that's something I can relate to, because you ask for me what comes up. I'd imagine what my awareness goes towards with being the son of 2 immigrant parents. A lot of working hard. My dad was up before the sun, didn't come home till after 6 p.m. My mom would work overtime till 11 p.m. at times. Necessarily wasn't home on Christmas or holidays. My older sister and I were pretty much home for the most part, and my older sister would raise me. So there's this work ethic that I'm proud of that's gotten me to a certain extent, but I also recognize it doesn't allow me to sit the F down. So there's that aspect of the work. And there is the money belief, and I'm sure you see it a lot, where both my parents were very cognizant of money. They would invest in, like, and I laugh because like my mom was more of, she would invest in things of value. She loves good, high quality fashion, good materials. So she would invest in those things. But my dad was more of the penny pincher and the stickler when it came to money. So I know I adopted a lot of that as well. So there's this twofold of like, I need to work really, really, really hard. And any money that I get, I have to like hold on to it or be very, very discerning with where I deploy it, because I work so hard to get it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's something else you learned as well. And so they worked a lot of hours. So have you ever heard time is money?
Oh yeah. A lot.
Who said time is money?
More my dad than anything.
So your dad said time, and that's a common cultural one too. I mean, I heard that growing up. I hear it all the time now. And so if time is money and your life is made up of time, then what does that make life?
Time is money and life is made up of time. Life is money. Money is my life source. I need it to live.
Yeah. So that's a belief. So the belief is that money is life. Without money, I don't live. And so there's people are probably listening or watching this and going, Mike's kind of crazy because you actually have to have money to live. Like, you absolutely have to. And that's how deep it goes, is no matter, like, me just stating it isn't going to get you there. And yep, I mean, to live the lifestyles that we live, money is necessary. Absolutely. But if we unwind and we go, but money, life isn't money. Like, life is life, and money is money, and time is time. But they get conflated. And so then we end up with, if I'm not productive, then I'm not valued. And my self-worth is tied to productivity, right?
Mm-hmm.
So do you have a hard time laying around, taking a nap, reading a book?
Yes. I think I've said it before, the line of, my mental health days make me feel bad because I waste time. Like, you sit on the couch, you worry that you should be doing work, and then you work, but you know you're tired and you should be sitting on the couch.
Yeah.
It's a terrible spiral to be in.
That's another one. You're wasting my time. I have a list here. You're wasting my time. I'm wasting my time. I don't have time. This will save you hours. I invested my time poorly. Save hours, invested time. I don't have time. You can't have or not have time. Time is just happening. So these are the phrases that trap the mind. Because until you unwind that, you can't keep using that language and claim to be free.
Wow. Because we hold ourselves bondage with that language.
Yeah. It holds whatever's going on in the nervous system in place, and it's shaping your reality. And so the people think that we're describing reality with our words, but we're actually using language in order to experience it.
You said something about the words laying on top of the emotion and the energies.
Yeah.
Now, the same words, like, say a word like money, could have different energy for different people.
Absolutely.
So, like, having a conversation around that, or even a conversation around work. And it's funny that you said this, because I also know with part of my programming and my upbringing was the message from my parents. But then by the time I got to high school, I remember going to high school parties, and I went to private school. So my parents busted their butt so I can go to private school. And I'm going to school with kids who were getting H2 Hummers and BMWs at 18 years old.
Yeah.
And they would always have house parties because their parents were never home. They were always on vacation. Mm-hmm. And that's the first time I could remember some of my reality being shattered in terms of thinking, okay, you need to work hard to make money. Yeah. But here are the people who have all the money and they're never working.
Yeah.
And that was so confusing. So with the words laying,
and even though you saw that, you witnessed that, you still work hard for money now.
Yeah. And there's another aspect to it of, the childhood Ted wanted their toys, where I would go back to even remembering one of my earliest memories as a little kid. One of my best friends I'd hang out with, he had all the action figures, all the toys. They had jet skis in the garage. I didn't have those things, Mike.
Yeah.
And I remember wanting them.
Yeah.
And I equated working hard to get them. Mm-hmm. And then as I got older and I saw the H2 Hummers and whatnot, and yes, I still saw that, but I still concluded my way to get that was work.
Yeah, because you're running off of a program from your parents. No matter the amount of evidence that is presented to you to say the contrary, you won't believe it.
So what do I do? Yep. That's probably the audience right now echoing, like, what do I do with? Because it's in our face. And you're right. I've seen it time and time again, yet the pattern emerges again.
Well, All right. So what do we do? So let's talk about your mental health days. What is difficult about doing nothing?
Honestly, what's difficult about doing nothing is the running list that occupies the mind.
Mm-hmm.
And then when, and this is transparent and honest, usually it would take a substance to quiet the mind.
Yep.
And it's, so I would rest, or my mental health days would be an indulgence in a substance, binge watching and occupying the mind with something else
Yep.
to filter out what I think I should be doing.
Yeah. So this is classic, right? I asked you about your experience of taking time off, right? And you told me all about your thoughts, which are made up of words. Yeah. What didn't you mention?
The body.
Yeah. You didn't mention how you felt at all. And most people don't. In fact, I'll redirect them a dozen times before they finally take a breath and slow down enough to tune into what am I feeling right now? And so this is part of doing early life regression work, is I can't get you to think your way to what caused the pattern. You have to feel your way to what caused the pattern. And with that, you actually can't have an agenda to try to find a specific pattern, because the mind has an agenda. Your feeling world has no agenda. And so we were all trained, step 1, step 2, step 3, you do this and then you do this. And so when I tell you how we're going to work on this, and I have to tell you that there are no steps to get there, and there's nothing you can do with your mind in order to achieve it, the ego throws a tantrum. And this is usually why, if anyone's going to do any serious work, they either need to be signed up in a retreat where it's very difficult to leave, because the mind will start coming up with all sorts of reasons why they shouldn't be there and why this is silly. Or they need to be locked into a high ticket, high cost for them container where they're meeting with a facilitator of some sorts. You know, there's some therapists that are good at this. There's a lot of coaches that specialize in this. It can be done over Zoom. It is possible. But it's got to be, the level of commitment required by the person to do the work has to be high, because you will find reasons not to show up. And they'll make total sense. And the people around you will support you on getting out of it, because nobody in your life actually wants Ted to change. Because if you change, then it changes their reality, and it's a challenge to their own ego, and their ego will do whatever it takes to not be challenged. Right?
Mm-hmm.
You ever, people, the idea of someone hitting rock bottom. I had to hit rock bottom before I changed. Well, of course they had to hit rock bottom. The ego is trying to keep things the same. The reality is shifting all around us all the time. Things are in constant flux, changing and moving in ways that we're totally unaware of. And we can tell ourselves a lie until we can't. And we call that rock bottom. Because when we get so far from reality, when we deceive ourselves so deeply that reality says, I don't care what you think reality is, I'm going to slap you with something that is undeniable, right? And that's what causes rock bottom. Rock bottom is caused by the lie that we tell ourselves. And it's not a conscious lie, it's an unconscious lie. And this is why most people will look at this type of work I'm talking about and say it's hocus pocus. They'll say it's unnecessary. They'll say, I just need to do a Tony Robbins event.
Yeah.
And the truth is that those are all bypassing the feeling world. Until you're getting into your feeling world and experiencing life through that first, then you are going to be ruled by the patterns of the past and the patterns of the mind, which every single word and every single sentence, you were not the original person who drafted that sentence. It's all inherited.
Yeah.
And so, there are no original thoughts.
Nothing new under the sun. And what scares me is...
and the old spiritual, every old spiritual text has a version of what you just said. There's nothing new under the sun.
Yeah.
And when you start getting into this, you start reading some of these old texts and you start going, whoa, there's a lot of wisdom there that the mind can't comprehend until you have the experience of feeling yourself through the world.
I definitely acknowledge I need to tap more into feeling, because what I've seen in others and what I perceive with myself, I consider myself a pretty intelligent guy. And what's scary about that is the rationale I can make to your point of why I should stay the same, why the other thing. I'm very good at convincing myself of that reality.
Oh, the intelligent people are the hardest.
That's scary.
Yeah, you're very good at mental gymnastics. You can justify anything.
How does one shift from the mind into the body? What does that practice look like for me? Humbly asking. I want to get out of my head. I want to get into the feels without an agenda, just to feel. And we can go from there. But like the start is just feel.
If you want to do it on your own, it's called meditation.
Which I do a bit of already, but not probably as extensive or consistent as I should.
And as so many people, I love that people do guided meditations and, they listen to music or, whatever. I think that's better than not meditating. But can you sit in silence and scan your body for 2 hours straight?
I lasted 20 minutes.
Yeah. Here's
that was my longest.
That's longer than most people have ever done it. And how did you feel before and after a 20-minute meditation?
Before I was pumped up, wired, exhausted. Afterwards, I was a bit groggy. Mm-hmm. I may or may not have fallen asleep. Mm-hmm. I was a bit lethargic. I was definitely more present of where I was. But after the meditation, there was the mental was trying to pull the body. I was like, I got to do this. And the body's like, not yet. And it was more of I want to say like out of the body or disembodied, but the mind is trying to move the body and the body's lagging behind. It wasn't quite there yet.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I felt afterwards.
Yeah. A lot of times when people get into meditation or some other techniques for getting into the body, they become incredibly tired.
Yeah.
And that's because they're tired.
Yep.
It's not that it's not rocket science. It's like someone's like, God, I got so tired after that. I'm like, you're tired.
Yeah, your body's giving you the clear signal.
You've been overriding it with coffee. You've been overriding it by being in your head instead of in your body. Like, you don't realize how tired we are until we stop.
Mm-hmm.
And so, one way to do it on your own is meditation. Like, actually stopping and putting your attention on and doing a body scan and feeling what's going on with your body. And there's layers and layers and layers there. Like, to this day, for me, what happens at 20 minutes of meditation versus 120 minutes, 2 hours of meditation. Wow. The layers that get traveled in that amount of time is incredible. It's it's trippy. And I witnessed people, and I remember I did a Vipassana retreat, which is I did a 10-day Vipassana. Vipassana is a technique, a specific meditation technique where you're doing body scans. And it's more than that, but just to simplify for the purpose of the podcast. And people would have total breakdowns. It's 10 days, 10 hours of meditation a day. You have your own dorm room. There's no talking to anybody. There's no eye contact. You are by yourself. So it's 10 days of complete silence. No music, no notebook, nothing to write with. You're not supposed to read or write. You're just supposed to be there. And there's specific times where you come and sit in a meditation hall and hit the bells, and that's when it's time to close your eyes and start using the meditation technique. And people are breaking down crying. It's not left and right, but they're finally feeling, and then a memory comes up, and now they got now they're processing this memory, and something pre-verbal comes up, and something that happened when they were a little kid. And I've heard people say, I don't know if it's true, if that's what really happened or not. It's some memory, and it's so long ago, and I say it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's true or not. What is important is your interpretation, or what your body believed happened. And to your point earlier, memories can lie. Same event, different people at the same event remember how something happened differently. But what's important for that person's nervous system is how they interpreted that event and what they made it mean about them and the world. And so anytime anyone's getting into this type of work, they go, sometimes they get attached to like wanting to know if that was true or not. And I'm like, it doesn't matter. Yeah. So, talk to a woman is like, I think my stepdad raped me when I was a little kid. I'm like, may or may not have actually happened. It actually doesn't matter. You don't need to go out to the world and announce that happened, because in order to do the work, you don't have to talk to anybody about it. You don't have to go confront anybody. You don't need to get forgiveness, or you don't need to have anyone apologize. Like, when you really do the work for yourself, that doesn't matter. Like the needing somebody else to do something in order for you to feel better is just a form of codependence. And so,
like you said, no victims.
There's no victims. There's no victims. There's no villains. And in this work, right? And when you do that, you stop seeing a world of victims and villains. You just see people playing out their patterns. Of course, they're going to be like that. Like people are getting all mad at certain they have their favorite politician to hate or their favorite politician to love or whatever. If you do the work long enough, that frame starts becoming pretty silly. I'm like, of course that guy is going to do that. Like, that's just how he is. He's playing out the pattern. Like, I'm not mad about it, but
yeah.
You know,
Following the script.
It's just exactly just following the script. Like, what did you expect? Like, that's not a surprise.
Yeah.
So when you start seeing patterns everywhere, yeah, the people tend to behave very predictably. I don't get surprised very often at all.
Yeah.
Someone's like,
I wanted to tell.
"Oh, I'm up and leaving. I'm moving town." I'm like, makes sense. Like, you haven't been the same. Like, every time something gets hard, you move. Like, yeah.
Yeah. I had a friend like that. And there are some people I like that where you're like, yeah, that tracks. That tracks. The behaviors make sense.
So I do want to mention that when you take your mental health day and you start feeling what some people might call anxiety,
yeah,
is to sit and be curious about it instead, and just realize that it may be your mental health day may be more work than it is play on that particular day.
And I will say I've started to, I'm actually going through this intentional 90-day fasting protocol, and really I've purged substances, and I'm just actually taking these 90 days to get more into my body and doing a 24-hour fast once a week. And this past Saturday, and it's funny you said described it as anxiety, I'm also looking to phone fast, and man, Mike, my heart rate was just like jacked. And I'm like, why is my heart rate jacked? And I said something I've never said to my wife before. I'm like, I'm feeling a little anxious. And she gets nervous. She's like, what's going on? Like, you've never been anxious before. We've been together for a long time. I'm the calm one out of us. And I'm just, I don't know. My heart rate is just like jacked. And I just like, I'm sitting on the couch while the baby's sleeping, and just, she's like, well, you want to talk through it or whatnot? I'm like, I don't know. And like, we sat there and like, we just chilled for a bit. She took a little bit of a nap on the couch. I kind of closed my eyes. I did like an 18-minute, just like laid there. And then afterwards, everything settled down. But I noticed, I'm like, why? And this wasn't something I was going to ask you just in passing. Like, why was my heart rate so jacked when, in essence, I was just like trying to wind down? Like, I'm starting this, like, hey, I'm going to fast. And I wasn't even in my fasting window. I had my first meal at that point, and I'm like, I don't know what's going on, but I'm recognizing like, okay, there's signals the body's trying to tell me, and I need to just kind of shut up, sit down, and listen.
Were you on a digital detox as well?
Not that day, but because I was checking.
You did a fast, and when you ate after you broke the fast, and then you had were experiencing anxiety. Yeah. Yeah, your body's talking to you.
Got some things to learn. I did want to ask.
I mean, fasting is a great way to learn about yourself, because food is really used as a pacifier for a lot of people. And removing that for multiple days, you start to see things that come up around your relationship to food. And so, my wife and I, we I'd say like 2 times a year, probably like twice a year, we do like a 72-hour fast, and things come up. More for her. I think she comes from. I'm one of those people that when if I'm experiencing fear or stress, I tend not to eat. Whereas most people, they'll eat more to kind of fill themselves. And when people have emotional eating going on, a fast is like, whoa. And then we did a 60-day keto where we're not eating and no spices on the food and stuff like this for 60 days. And so even though you're eating calories, you're not getting the same level of satisfaction.
Mm-hmm.
And wow, 60 days of that. We each had days where we were having a day, we were working through things. There was things that were coming up, and the dreams became vivid, and we became more aware what was going on in the dream space. Okay, why am I getting so angry for no reason right now? And luckily, you know, we're usually having our waves on different times, so she could be the chill one while I'm losing my shit, and vice versa.
Help each other out. And I could say, like, transparently, part of that was, now that I think about it, it was actually right before I broke my fast, and snacking was one of the biggest things that I'm learning through this fast, not snacking. And because I'd go to the fridge, grab a handful of grapes, right? I'd have a chomp bar. I would snack. And I got that just out of habit. And it was a combination of not snacking, and also there was a conversation that I needed to have with my wife. And I was probably amping it up in my body, anticipating like a passionate conversation, and it wasn't a passionate conversation at all. It was like, oh, word. But it was just the lack of snacking and anticipating a conversation, and everything just pumped up. That was kind of sitting there. So I had to like chill, relax. Man, I'm doing my breath work, and it's like going down, but not as low as it should. So before we wrap up, I did want to ask something you mentioned about ancestral memories. And maybe we don't have a lot of time for that. That may be a part 2. Might be a part 2 of the live, but maybe you want to tease that and give a little bit of a taste.
Sure.
Wrap up.
Yeah.